So I think what would be cool now would be to go through some of the different mic types, because people might have an idea already that mics, like there's just this hugely important extra stage of filtering after the speaker, and the position is so important as well, which is why it's great to have that kind of dark to bright position control. And let's use the upfront cab, because I think it's just a really great kind of neutral canvas that exemplifies the kind of Cali sound really well. And let's kind of get our ears in on the 57, and then we'll flick through a couple of mics, and maybe we'll just stop after each one to chat a tiny bit about the sound, and then, yeah, see where we go from there.
All right.
I mean, that blows my mind how different the 421s are.
Yeah. Oh, were you just flicking between the two there?
Yeah.
The old and the new?
The old and the new. It's such a drastic difference. And yet they get talked about interchangeably. And I actually think over time, there's just been like a funny change that happened, because I know that guys like Colin and Andy got the 57 and 421 combination thing from Bob Rock.
Right.
Who produced lots of records before the release of the 421-2.
Okay.
So it's that older one, which sounds a bit more full range. It's got more mid-range, less kind of scrapiness. It's a kind of bigger sounding mic than a 57. Yet when guys like Colin and Andy took over, they were using twos, like the 421 twos, which are very metallic and scooped sounding.
Right.
So there's this thing where people talk about the combination of a 57 and a 421, but they're actually kind of talking about two different eras of tone, I think. And if you want the kind of modern guitar thing, or kind of metalcore guitar thing, 57 plus the 421-2 just works so well. I actually don't like how it sounds on its own. I find it quite harsh.
Yeah, I was going to say this is the... Yeah, I prefer that. Not necessarily prefer ones, but it's more just to the ear straight away.
Yeah.
That one doesn't quite invade as much.
No, yeah, the 421's really invasive. I think that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
But as a blend, it's really cool.
Yeah.
So we'll get onto that in a bit. But so that's the two 421s, and I just wanted to pause to point out what a big difference there is, actually. So that's why we included both.
Nice.
So let's keep going. So with the ribbons, the big thing you notice, I think, is it's like you've got 2 octaves more low end on there, and we're listening on a really big speaker system, and you can just feel the kind
That's why I like the ribbons.
Yeah.
I like to have that information there and choose whether I want to get rid of it afterwards.
Yeah.
Is the reason that I generally tend to use like a 121 and a 57 in combination.
The cool thing is, like with the 121, is it's got such a dark top end.
Yeah.
That it doesn't interfere that much with the top end of the 57. It doesn't completely change the character quite as much. As in, you can have not much of it in the mix and still get the benefit of the extension of the low end. So
yeah,
it's a cool mic. It's famous for a reason. With this one, in fact, with most of the non-dynamic mics, the brightest setting is actually dead center.
Yeah.
And there's no way I could make it any brighter than that.
So that's a 121 dead center of that cab.
Yeah.
Which is this. You know, it's not very bright.
No, but I'm calling it dead center, but the ribbon's like this long.
Yeah.
So it's actually covering a whole kind of quite a large rectangle shape out of the middle of the cone. So you can't, it's not like the 160, which I was playing before, which is more like a traditional microphone format. Dead center, you do get more top end out of that one. But yeah, with a 121, most of the time I find people either use them dead center or quite far off as a blend. But you can do whichever you like with this.
I've tried both. You know, I've tried using the 121 dead center and bringing a 57 further away. And sometimes that's really nice. And then vice versa, I'll do the other. And I'll actually use the 121 just to pick up just low information compared to the 57, which will be closer. And it's very genre specific on the sound I'm going for. But it's nice having the options there, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it's also arrangement specific. You know, typically when I've heard your music, it's not filled with lots of synths and, you know, like other elements which might start to need that space. And typically, I think the bass players you've worked with have had quite a kind of aggro bass tone as well.
Yeah.
And that helps kind of because they've got lots of top end information, so they're still audible. They're not just getting swallowed in that low end of the guitars.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, the tones you get are absolutely great. And it's cool that within this plugin, you've got the kind of option to do it the more scoopy metal way or the really kind of fat, thick, kind of organic thing as well. Let's move from the 121. We've got the two condensers to go through next. We've got the 414 and the 184. Condensers don't get that much love on guitar cabs, but I think they can be great. And
well, when I saw you were using the KM184, the Neumann, that's when I got a pair after that when you were using them, and I used a few of the IRs you'd sent across a couple of years ago that had that, and so I ended up getting them, trying them on guitars, and liking them quite a lot. And it's actually quite a familiar sound now that I enjoy, that I never thought I would use before.
I find it's very good at capturing the sound of a cab in a room.
You're right.
Like, I don't mean for room miking. I mean that what you think a cab sounds like, if you put a 184, and it's another mic you can put dead center if you want, because even though people think a small diaphragm condenser is going to be really fizzy, they're not those ones. But where a dynamic mic kind of boosts the upper mid-range generally, that's a lot flatter, so it doesn't feel as hyped in that region. Right. But for the same reason, sometimes it can sound really cool for jamming, and then you put it in the mix and it's a bit far away from you.
Yeah.
But as a blend, it's great. And if it's dead center, it tends to actually work quite well. So there's a lot of talking and dancing about architecture, as it were. So let's have a little listen to those. We'll go from the 121 to the C414, because that's probably the second most low-endy mic.
Okay.
And then we'll move to the 184.
Nice.
And then from that to the 184. I really love how that sounds, and I find that kind of like dark to bright thing, it's more like a presence knob than like a fizz control, like it kind of is with other microphones.
And it's unintrusive.
Yeah.
Everything you hear there sounds to me really smooth and sweet, even though you're getting the information there, but nothing really jumps at you. No nuisance frequencies like jumping out. I've always found that with the 184, just very smooth across the board.
Yeah. It's wicked, and I always will include it in our plugins and in my own IR shooting, because I just think it's such a useful sound sometimes. Yeah. And I know some guys, like I know Will Putney and the guys at Atrium Audio as well, are using 184s quite regularly for high gain tones and getting really good results. So, all right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to check out how some of these microphones combine. And I think it makes sense to keep an SM57 in there at all times, because it's just a sound that everyone knows. And let's be realistic, most people are going to have that and then add other things to it to get a different vibe. So we'll stick with the same cab, so we're not kind of getting thrown around with different cabs within the plugin. And tell you what, if you play, I'll just gradually bring in a little bit of each, and I'll keep the levels equal between the two.
Okay.
So people are kind of getting a 50-50 split.
Let's do it.
Pretty cool.
It's great.
Loads and loads of cool options in there, aren't there? So there's actually one mic that we haven't spoken about at all during this, one mic option. And I've deliberately kind of kept it separate because it is this Fredman dual 57 mic array. So it's a technique popularized by Studio Fredman over in Gothenburg. And they kind of use this technique to record a lot of those early Gothenburg sound melodic death metal kind of record. So,
Okay.
we're talking like In Flames and Dark Tranquility and...
What a name.
Yeah, great one. So the technique it was very mysterious for a long time.
Okay.
But in recent times, Fredman's actually come out with a microphone clip that gives you the correct microphone angles and positions. And it's long been known that it was a combination of 157 completely straight and the other one at an angle. And then it became known that it was the straight one was in the middle and then the other one was next to it. But it turns out the right way to have it is actually the angle one has to be 55 degrees, not 45. Okay. And it actually sits slightly in front of the other one. And this does a weird thing. Okay. It actually deliberately introduces some phase cancellation. And what that does is it cancels some of the fizz.
Right.
So in many ways, I think actually the Fredman mic technique sound is more to do with the phase cancellation than the angles. I mean, the angles are important, don't get me wrong, but you can get a similar effect with another mic straight on really far away, like from the center and back a bit, or adjusting the angle so you get some cancellation. That actually gives you a lot of the same character.
And is this mic positioning, as in this, it's not dependent on where on the speaker, it's literally just that those two, as long as they're together doing that, you get that phase cancellation wherever you...
The phase cancellation would be anyway, yeah, because the capsule, the angle one's closer. But the way the Fredman technique is done is always in the middle.
Oh, okay.
So in the plugin, there isn't actually an option to move the Fredman mic array. You'll notice the dark bright knob gets kind of grayed out. And that's because it's to do this really specific sound. Now, I think it's a cool sound, and it's nice to have it as an option. It's got less top end, and actually because of the fact you're blending a really off-axis mic, which gets less like sound pressure, you actually get a little bit less low end as well. So it's a bit more of a mid-focused kind of sound. It's very different to just a single 57. Even if you move the single 57 around, there's no way you can replicate this sound.
Interesting.
For the full effect, they actually blend a greenback cab and a vintage 30 cab in Studio Fredman. Both mic'd up with this way. So 4 microphones, 2 cabs. And you could simulate that maybe by using one of the brighter and one of the darker cabs within the plugin.
Is it worth hearing the 57 on that cab and jumping over?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's do that.
So we can hear just how massive a difference it makes.
Yeah,
okay.
Let's go for it.
Wow, yeah, that is a big difference.
It's almost a bit like HM2-y, if you know what I mean, like that kind of rolled off top end.
Yeah.
And it puts the upper mids in a kind of different place. And what I did when you were playing is I went back to the 57 and made it as dark as you could go. And even there, it's like nowhere near to that.
So would you describe this as a utility style placement to sort of add something that you can't get out of the other? Is it that kind of thing? Is that the way to approach it, or?
I'd approach it as it's almost like it's just a separate microphone. Like it's a whole different thing to me. And what's cool with the plugin is you can do stuff you couldn't normally do, where you could combine a Fredman with another. You can make unreal combinations of mics because they'd have to be literally on top of each other to do it. So in a way that you couldn't do in real life, you can combine these Fredman placements with other microphones on the same cab. And actually, let's just do something here where let's blend in another Fredman cab. So let's go to one of the brightest ones mixed with the up front and see what that sounds like.
Yeah, it's an interesting sound.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
but I can hear how it would totally be usable within the mix of everything else you've got going on.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one that's fun to experiment with, and I've certainly been guilty in the past of referring to any combination of an on and off axis 57 as the Fredman technique.
Right.
And I now retract that whenever I've done it because it clearly is quite a specific thing.
Do you know where I feel like just hearing it, where I feel like I'd use it, is if, say, I was doing something with lots of delay and reverb in front of a gain tone, which is inherently going to give me loads of intense stuff at the top. I would try that setting on with that sort of sound to see if that can be tamed as a layer. That's where I jump straight in with that, I think.
Yeah, again,
that's cool.
That's one of the really cool things about this, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we were discussing actually before we started filming how I was saying I feel like recabbing is almost more useful than reamping. Like if you're recording amps and you've got a load box and you're taking a DI from the amp, even if you've got a mic'd up cab, I find it so useful to have the option to switch around the IRs and, you know, try different microphones or different placements, or in this case, like different cab sounds as well, like different examples of the cab. You can find like new places for these tones. Like you could.
That's
like,
exactly what we did with the track that I did with for this plugin, was that we sent it over to you and you essentially recabbed what I'd done. You know, I'd got my tones how I liked them with the gain settings and everything, and it was a case of literally recabbing it. Yeah,
because if you know your amps,
you
know how to get them to respond to you the way you want, and that's the really important thing. And it can be pretty annoying to try and recreate that after the fact. And if you're running like effects pedals in front of the amp and in the loop, and you've got to replicate all that just working off a clean DI, that's a load of work.
Yeah.
So
recabbing
is the way forward. So I think at this point might be a good idea to check out some other kinds of tones. I think we've blistered people's eardrums enough with the block letter 5150. I think let's go in a completely different direction. Let's power up the Fredman twin sister and do some kind of more fuzzy kind of tones, some more crunchy tones, and some more clean tones. And see where we end up.